Happy Halloween, everybody, and welcome to the Haystack Halloween special for 2024. My name is Jonathan, and I'll be your host. Today we're going to go over some of the history of Halloween and the origins, and see what kind of view we can have as Christians and Latter-day Saints in viewing this holiday in ways that we can celebrate it. I'll share with you some of the activities that my family and I have done, and ways that we have found value in it with our religion today. So stick around, we're going to have lots of fun, we're going to go through lots of things. Please include your questions, and don't forget to like and subscribe, and share it with your friends. Thank you, and let's get going. So how is Halloween celebrated today? Well, if we were to watch TV, it would just look like a bunch of low-value men and women celebrating doing stupid things, and there being candy involved. However, my favorite experiences with Halloween as a kid was getting to dress up and going to church functions like the trunk or treat and go among trusted people you know and trick-or-treating among there. And then I was often mixed in with a ward social, such as like a chili cook-off with hot dogs and cornbread, and I love that, absolutely love that. We also used to decorate the church for haunted house. I'm glad they don't do that anymore, because it's not a pretty picture when you walk into a primary room and you see, chainsaws and blood and stuff. It's not appropriate. That's not even the kind of haunted house I would ever want to go to. Give me a good straw maze, I'll be happy. The fall harvest time is a time of celebration. It always has been. It's a perfect time for storytelling. It's a perfect time for bringing in all the goods from the harvest and having wonderful activities. And I think that's historically what it has been for most cultures. It's a time of celebration and giving thanks and offering, because it's also a time when everything is starting to get darker and you're entering into a time of winter. And that time of winter and dormancy, a lot of cultures also perpetuated storytelling and things like that because they're enclosed. So this is the last of the work for the year for a lot of cultures, where they closed up shop and keeping work going outside in the winter to a minimum. So there's some disputations between many Christians and academic scholars who dispute that Halloween is based off of Samhain, Gaelic tradition, and a feast festival towards the end of the year. Thus they would don themselves with masks and everything, and this, they also believed the veil between life and death to be the thinnest, because you don't know whether you're going to make it through the winter. Do you have enough food? Are you prepared? The nights are getting longer. Death is very prevalent. Bugs are coming out. The bats are coming out to eat the bugs, and you have these dark things flying back and forth. You have bogs out there in Ireland and in Scotland, and they have these gases that burst out these colorful flames, and this fuels a lot of different traditions and feelings and things that we look at today as maybe fairy tale. Whereas Christians looked at this time of year as All Saints' Day, a time to remember the early saints of the church. And then this kind of morphed into just remembering our past loved ones, our ancestors. But what if that had an ancient root somewhere? Perhaps an ancient ordinance? Because the way this is celebrated is you have young children, in a way, singing carols, going door to door, singing for a soul cake. They'll sing a song or even say a prayer for the person at the door to pray one of their ancestors out of purgatory and into the gates of heaven. So does this have a more ancient root? And why does it rhyme so much with ordinances such as baptisms for the dead and perhaps other ordinances we do? Because even during this time, Christians also saw this as a time where the veil is thinnest, where that ethereal realm is being pressed upon by those who have passed. And we see images of ghosts and white bed sheets. But why is that? Because it's an easy costume to put on? Or perhaps because of the white burial shroud that often is similar to that veil between life and death, symbolic of that veil. I think there's lots of things that we can glean from this. And based on these early Christian views of this time of year and All Saints' Day, we also can do this by celebrating the ancient saints and our ancestors by doing temple work, by gathering scattered Israel from beyond the veil, from the four quarters of heaven. But why the costumes? Well, these people during this time would also put on animal skins and costumes as a way to disfigure themselves or hide themselves from those wandering spirits, as to not be haunted or affected by them in any way. Which, in a way, it's funny because we also remember Adam and Eve, who also received coats of skin during a fall. And this is a covering of Christ's atonement upon mankind. In fact, there's many scholars who have speculated that, like places like in ancient Egypt, where there's gods that are anthropomorphized, if that's the correct word, they have animal heads, like Anubis, the jackal head, or Horus, that hawk head. That these different animal heads were as a way to differentiate different gods during a ritual presentation or a creation narrative. Not that people look at Sobek and go, oh, they actually believe that there was a crocodile god. It was more that they recognized crocodile as, one having great appetite. And there's different attributes with this. Sobek being from the Nile represents fertility. So it's representing fertility, but also appetite. So it also represents a lustful appetite. And this all comes together when we look at ancient Mesopotamia and we see the legend of Adapa. Adapa is the Mesopotamian Adam story. However, instead of naming animals, he's naming characteristics, but he's attributing them to things like animals to give a definition. It's easy to say, to look at an animal and say, a hyena laughs. So you would identify that kind of characteristic with that. And then these also, they represent in constellations and stars, and it gives a narrative. It helps them tell the times and seasons. We know that the origin of writing came with Adam. And the purpose of writing, like in ancient Mesopotamia, we have lots of receipts, purchase agreements. This was a way to seal a deal or to verify something. And so this becomes a very big theme scripturally. And written language is a way that you can leave off your work and leave it to the next generation, and they can build off of it, and it continues and continues and continues. So is there any harm in dressing up? I think in the Salt Lake Temple, they did the temple presentations, and they would, mention, oh, here's an apron, this represents priesthoods, things like that. Acting is not a bad thing. Presentations and giving an explanation, it's something that we're accustomed to, especially during this time of year. However, in the past, it's always been to teach something. It's like our eternity, our Genesis, it's spelled out in the stars. It's spelled out in the constellations. And rather than spelling it all out, these ancient temples, they don't have a lot of writing on them. In fact, they'll have, simple imagery, like so above, so below, as above, so below. Imitating like the ceiling on earth and in heaven. You have certain iconography, in my opinion, that provokes the next part of the story of a narrative by perhaps an usher or someone escorting you through your life's journey that is being symbolically narrowed down into a temple procession. So how is it that I celebrate Halloween this year? This year I didn't get around to making soul cakes, which is something I really love to do. And last year I did this and described it in one of my videos. But a soul cake is a very aromatic cookie, and it's made with your pumpkin spices, very aromatic. And then I like to dust mine with powdered sugar. And traditionally there's a cross in it, which represents Christ. And this would be like early forms of carolers and trick-or-treaters would go door to door and offer to pray, for an apple or a soul cake, pray the individual's family member out of purgatory into heaven. And it was a way for good fortune, or misfortune. And sometimes that misfortune was provoked by the kids not getting, their soul cake. And so typically this time of year, you have lots of festivals. So you have kids and families going to these big bonfires and festivals and feasts. But when the parents are busy with the festivals themselves, the kids all group up together and they go off and do kids stuff. And that's usually, wreaking havoc in some cases. Kids get up to mischief. For us, we have trunk or treating. And I think that's a wonderful activity, fun thing to do. Something we did this year was we did a scavenger hunt with the kids. We did Twister with a Halloween theme. And I actually cut 4 bushels of corn stalks, and placed them in my front yard. And I thought this was kind of a fun representation of gathering of Israel, or the 4 quarters of heaven and earth. It's a good representation of things that we could be focused on during this holiday. It's a harvest season, and so that kind of reminds me of the things that matter most. Gathering by covenant here in mortality, and also beyond the veil in the temple. The soul cakes do this too, with the cross in them. However, I like to also think of that as the 4 quarters of earth and heaven, gathering together. I think that's a wonderful way to reflect and think about our ancestors during this time where the veil is thinnest. For us, historically, we are gathering scattered Israel. We are awaiting the veil to be lifted and for the Savior to return, and for us to come forth in the morning of the first resurrection. So I think last day's theme and focus on our ancestors is a wonderful, wonderful focus for this time of year. And so the iconography I put out, would represent that. Pumpkins. Pumpkins are a wonderful illustration of the preservation, fertility, and everything, especially here in America. In America, it was squash, it was pumpkins that helped save the pilgrims, and it was by the help of the Native Americans who were primary ancestors through Manasseh and Lehi. And here we have Ephraim coming in. You have Ephraim and Manasseh uniting in America and being preserved. And what does America mean? Well, it's based off of the Italian name Amerigo, but that means ruler of the sovereign houses, ruler of the houses. That kind of sounds familiar, because what does Pharaoh mean? Pharaoh means house ruler. It doesn't mean king of Egypt. It means house ruler. We remember in the story of Joseph, he was sold into Egypt. Yet it was there in his service, Joseph's service to the king, that preserved not only Egypt, but all the lands around the world. All of the earth, right? It didn't really preserve all of the earth, but that was the language that was used for a specific reason. And I think that has to do with our latter days. Because in a way, America is very similar to Pharaoh, meaning house ruler. And Joseph was preserved here in Pharaoh's household. Yet even Pharaoh looked to Joseph as father to Pharaoh. And we've been told that if it wasn't for the restoration and the preservation of this covenant, and if it wasn't for this church today, all things would be lost. Remember, it's this nation that all other nations have patterned their constitution after. All the states patterned their constitution after this nation's constitution. It is Joseph, that lineage, that restoration, that is the preservation lifeline for all of the world in the latter days. Just as Joseph saved all others and gathered up in a time of plenty, was able to redeem his brethren and save Israel, gather Israel. The same thing is happening for us today in these latter days. So I will be leaving a link for a more in-depth history of Halloween from the History Channel in the description of this video. This was an explanation of the way that I have recognized some of the traditions and how we've kind of repurposed traditions for our family that give us more meaning, especially as we go towards the millennium and the return of our Savior Jesus Christ. If you like this, please leave a like, comment, share your thoughts, share this with other people. Don't forget to subscribe, and don't forget, last year's video is also going to be in the description as well. So thank you. Bye-bye.
sugar days. Candy overload, my taste buds explode. A moment of bliss, then the guilt takes its toll. Regretting my choices, feeling so low.